Okay, so I've soldered all the connections now on the edge connector. As before with everything else, I put the connector in place and I made a solder joint on one end just here at the right hand end, and then I made sure that the connector was fully seated by pushing my thumb against the connector and heating up this joint just to make sure it was fully in place. And then I did a point at the opposite end, again making sure it was fully in place. Obviously, because these pins are made of metal, you want to keep your finger out of the way of the ones you're heating up. But if you do the two ends like that and make sure it's fully seated properly and in a straight line, and then you can go on to solder all the ones in the middle. So we're really on the home stretch now. Just a few more things to do. So those are all these components that we've got left. So move all this extra stuff out of the way. So we just have headers now, and these are used to either make connections off the board for the serial programming of the ESP32 and other serial connections if you want to make them, and also for jumpers. So these little things here are called jumpers, and you can bridge two pins with one of these, and we'll be using that technique to select some different options for the way that the board's configured. So the places we need to populate are the 2x3 area here. This is for selecting which serial channel on the Z80 you want to use, if you do want to use Z80 serial. So we'll just put that in place. This again, I'm going to just do one connection and then check that it's properly seated, which it looks as though it is, and then I'm going to do the remaining ones. Okay, and then we have this one, which is 2x9. That one goes in there. So we'll do that one. Similar technique. Try and make sure it stays in place as you turn it over. Do one point at one end, or in the middle. It doesn't really matter. Some ways for something like this, doing one in the middle might be quite a good idea. Make sure it's seated, and then go on and do all the others. So, so what I'm actually soldering now is a set of positions for jumpers that allow you to configure which parts of the board are connected to which. So the standard configuration for this board is that the Raspberry Pi has one serial channel, and that is connected to one of the serial channels of the ESP32. So that's the only way that those two components can communicate with each other. So that's actually done by these two here, where it says Pi and ESP32. So we'll be connecting jumpers across those, and then it's also optional how you connect this serial connection, which goes off to a PC or Mac or whatever. So this is a point for a cable that converts from USB to serial protocol, and then these points here are, as I said before, for the Z80, choosing which channel of the Z80 serial you want to use if you're using serial on your Z80. but the only one that's critical is really the Pi ESP connection, depending on your application. Okay, so now we're going to fill in some of the single line headers. So you just have a long strip like this, which can be broken into sections. So the first one has 6 pins, so you count off 6 or just offer it up and get the right length. And if you just hold it with your nails between 2 pins like this and just push, it should break cleanly at a point between 2 pins, so you still have you have your 6 item header and the bit left over. So we'll do that one. Okay, so that's that. And then another one that's needed is this one down here, the Z80 clock. So again, if you just put your, so count off 2 pins and just snap that off. That one goes in there. Now sometimes, so with this, it doesn't really protrude above this Raspberry Pi connector, so it's going to be hard to hold that in place while I'm soldering it. So one thing you can do is just use one of these temporarily, stick that over the top, just makes it a bit taller, doesn't have to be properly pushed down, but you can push it down a little bit, just makes it a little bit taller and allows you to hold it in place after the board's turned over. Okay, solder that in place. So we're going to just take that header off again. That one's it's not exactly vertical. I think I might just need to redo that. You can see that's got hot and burnt my fingers slightly, but I was fairly quick, so it didn't hurt too much. I'm leaving that off because you may have a separate clock board for your Z80, your RC2014, in which case you wouldn't want the Raspberry Pi to be producing a clock for you. In general, I don't have a clock on my RC2014, and I let the Raspberry Pi produce the clock. The benefit of that is that you can change the clock speed for different emulation of different computers. So for instance, a TRS80 would run at a different speed than a ZX Spectrum, so the Pi software is programmed to know that and to produce the correct clock speed for the computer you're emulating. So if you put this jumper in place, then you need to make sure you haven't got a separate clock board in your system. So I think that is pretty much it for the build. There are 1 or 2 more things that you can add optionally. You can add a header strip here, and these are just extra pins that are available from the ESP32. You may also want to use this prototyping area, and there's small additional prototyping areas around the side. So there's probably not much point in adding these connections here, because you may just want to connect them to your prototyping area if you have any extra circuits you want to add of your own. There's a ground point here, which is just for testing purposes. It's quite useful to have a place that you can put a logic analyzer or an oscilloscope, so you can put a pin on there if you want to, a header pin, a single pin, just to provide you with a convenient place to get a ground signal. But other than that, that's it. That's completed now, and we can go on to testing, which I'll do in a different video.